Hello and welcome to Tactically Sound, an RPG-focused podcast. I'm Spencer at the Yetti Den, and I'm joined as always by my co-host JumbyJumbwa, aka Matt. And we've been diving through this series of episode-by-episode breakdowns of the Fallout TV series, and today we're doing episode 5, which is called The Trap. Overall, I thought this episode was super interesting, but Matt, what was your general overarching thoughts of the episode?
Really interesting. Just like what you were saying, I think my general thought in regards to the overall episode is okay, we're getting some things that I've always have been interested in regards to the Fallout universe. And I have been waiting to see how the show is going to incorporate those curiosities and play with that. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about this episode.
Yeah, so what I noticed is it has these themes of cults and conspiracy, but also this idea of selling out and McCarthyism and protecting your family and this competing vision for America. So, we have several scenes in this episode, from what I call the opening scene, which is the ad, and being on set, meeting Bud Askins, meeting the Hawthorns, going to the Cooper residence for the rap party, and then they go to Super Duper Mart, which is the present day, where Cooper Howard is now the ghoul, and then interacting with this character that's essentially almost like he calls himself the president and that he's the government. But I don't know, that scene was really interesting. And I kind of leaned on the wiki for that one, because I was like, I don't really understand, what does he mean by he's the president and he's the government? And there's is this a faction that's pretending to have power? So that scene was interesting. And then in Vault 4, we meet Overseer Benjamin. And then it bounces back to a really cool scene between Barb and Coop, but then also scenes between Charles Whiteknife and Coop, and they talk about being actors and veterans, and kind of this competing notion of who's really in the cult. And then we get more Vault 4, and then we get in Vault 4, the episode ends really kind of with this horrific situation where she makes the discovery of these pods. So right. We'll start at the beginning with the ad. The ad is essentially where we meet Cooper Howard as essentially Vault Boy. He's selling the vision of the vaults, and what's cool is this is one of those things that I didn't notice the first watch, but Vault 4 is the vault that is in the ad. Did you pick up on that?
Yes, yeah. The first time I watched it, I picked up on that.
Okay, yeah. See, that just all the numbers, timelines, dates, I struggle with. So seeing this the second time, I was like, Vault 4. Oh shoot! So the Hawthorns, did you get the sense that the Hawthorns were actually going to be testing Vault 4, or are the Hawthorns just actors playing in the ad?
I felt like they were actual people, because just seeing how Cooper Howard's wife is acting, I'm missing her character's name.
Barbara,
right. How she acts, it already seems like people are sold and brainwashed, and already there's, it seems like the management is already trying to get people through the doors, and this is going to happen. And even throughout this episode, there's a little bit of that sinister cult dish vibes, that bringing in the incoming doom for us all humanity, But yeah, that I think it those people, the scientists, the Hawthorns, they actually were kind of like guinea pigs experiments. I mean, it's not hard to believe, because even in our world, we see people conduct experiments all the time in regards to what would it be like to live in a spaceship, or on Mars, or on the moon, in a moon base, right? There's other ones too that are more environmental studies. But This seems like it's just kind of piggybacking on that aspect of our world and, incorporating it into the Fallout universe as well.
Yeah, and in the ad, he calls the Hawthorns heroes for making the sacrifice. He boasts that this 3 foot thick lead casing is strong enough to keep out the rads and the reds, and that's where we get that notion of this McCarthyism. Except this is another timeline thing that definitely threw me off guard, and I didn't really put it together until taking notes and transcribing all this. Okay, the Great War is happening, like it's been happening for like the past, I want to say 10 years. Mm-hmm. That is not what I understood the Great War to be. I thought the Great War was like the bomb drops and that's the war, but he's a veteran, not of Korea, but a veteran of the war between the Chinese. So that's Operation Anchorage in Alaska. And so It's like they kept saying he was a veteran, and I was trying to grasp, like, are they talking like, is this our timeline that he was a veteran in, like Korea, or is it,
I see what you're saying.
But it's like, no, the war has been going on. It's just that nuclear weapons haven't been brought to the table until later in Cooper's timeline. So Cooper was there at Operation Anchorage. And so that leads us into, when the color slowly fades back into the scene, Bud Askins, and this guy's name comes up so many times in the episode, and I think they're trying to make it clear who Bud is, so that way later in the season when we meet Bud as a robot, that we're like, Bud Askins, okay, we know who that is. Like, they drive it home so many times. It's like, I'm Bud Askins, I'm Bud Askins. And so Bud was previously a military defense contractor with west-tec, and he designed, his company designed the T-45, which Cooper Howard kind of chastises him because he's like, that almost lost us Alaska to the Reds. And so I thought that was a really cool tension, which you're going to see throughout the whole episode, which is that Cooper Howard hates Bud Askins. And I have a feeling that some of that hatred that we sense later in the Ghoul is going to tie to his hatred of Bud Askins. And like that, to me, they're setting up as his mortal enemy. Like, Bud Askins represents everything that Cooper Howard hates as a veteran. Like these military defense guys who don't have to fight the wars, and then their equipment fails him. And now he's trying to rob him of the freedom that Cooper Howard believes he fought to protect. And so this theme is like really interconnected. And so Bud Askins brushes off the accusation. He's just like, oh, product management isn't really my bag, but I had this new thing, HR R&D, and he's like, management. And Askins explains that scale in 3 dimensions should not be how they measure success. So the 4th dimension of time is his focus for vault-tec. So that's what vault-tec's big sell is to, their shareholders and their corporate, execs, and their vision for America, which, ties into the episodic tagline, which is what happens when the ranchers have more power than the sheriff. So what happens when vault-tec has more power than the government? It's not just the battles that people like Cooper Howard had to fight as boots on the ground, but now it's this concept of managing our time, right? And so that tension we'll see between Cooper and Barbara. So at the party, which is the rap party, this is at the Cooper residence, and they introduce again the theme. Another theme of this episode to me is the theme of dog companionship, like the love. I noticed that
too. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that theme then?
Well, what I was noticing about it, this is actually the first time I noticed it on the second watch, is I noticed that Cooper has a history with dogs, and it kind of humanized his character a little bit more for me this time around, even more so. And it connects back with Dog Meat. What's his name in the show? What's his QR code?
Yeah. It's like C10 something. Yes. Yeah. Or I just said I'm terrible with numbers. There's no way I'm going to remember that dog serial number.
But anyways, like if you notice back on the earlier episodes, he has with more so than any other character, he has more of a soft spot for the dog. And then you see in this episode where that he owned a dog, and I was just thinking as he was talking to his dog, as we all do, I was thinking, man, in the future, you could easily just shoot that dog because your heart and soul has been ripped to shreds with whatever you've been through. And just to see this contrast of darkness between his root character and the ghoul, it's interesting. What were you going to add on top of the dog? What did you notice?
Well, yeah, so it's the movie poster, right? A man and his dog, and I guess that connects to something with the Fallout lore. It's an Easter egg. The poster in the background of the TV series has a different set of characters. These are altered in post-production. And then it's a reference to the 1975 film A Boy and His Dog, which is one of the inspirations for the first Fallout games. So there's also the theme where they argue later after the party about will the dog be allowed to go in the vault, and that triggers him.
Yes.
And then she says, dogs eat meat, and that's a problem. So dog meat, that's where I think they're making all these connections. But at the party, I love the scene, the way it was shot. If you live in LA, there's Academy of Motion Pictures Museum, and they do all these screenings of old films on film. And it reminds me of a lot of those movies, like North by Northwest. There's another one about race car drivers, I think with James Madison, if that's his name, don't quote me, but Grand Prix. And it has those like colors that you're used to seeing on film. It just has this really cool old
Once
Hollywood.
Upon a Time in Hollywood. Remember that movie?
Right. It totally looks like that too. Like very similar aesthetic. And just the way they shot it, it was a really cool look for Fallout, because it's not just like a caricature of LA. It really felt like LA. It really felt like they put a big budget into the way that they designed the sets, and the way that it feels like a classic, Hitchcock style, set dressing, something like what you would see in Vertigo, or, all these cool environments. I thought they did a really good job.
I feel like for the first time, I felt a little bit of Westworld vibes, not necessarily through the subject matter, even though, of course, we are dealing with Cooper Howard, but also through the cinematography and jumping between timelines of kind of like, how Westworld's like, here's the world outside of Westworld, and here's what's happening in Westworld. I almost got that storytelling feel, even visually, with this one. Where here's what's going on in, outside of Fallout, and here's what's going on in the Fallout, current world. So I kind of got that similarity between what was happening in Westworld, that viewing experience, with this episode, because throughout the whole episode, we're traveling back to Cooper Howard. We're traveling back to our short-term future or whatever, right? Timeline. And instead of being in 22, whatever date it is, right?
Is it like 2077 to then, like, I don't know. I'm not even going to pretend to remember the dates.
It's like 200 years later, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting how I noticed it the second watch. I'm like, oh, this totally feels like we're getting some nice juicy details of what's happening outside of Fallout. And then here's how it applies in Fallout, and this is what's happening in their world, right? So I thought that was interesting to finally see and make that connection between Westworld and the show. And I'm curious if I'm going to notice that anywhere else, but it really works well for this show. And I'm happy that they picked it up, the producers of Westworld. So they're doing really well with it. I just wanted to point that out before we moved on.
Yeah, no, totally. That's a great point, because it is, and it has that luxuriousness of Westworld as well. But yeah, so Bud Askin shows up, and on the news we're hearing about the war, and I guess what just messed with my head was that there was this beautiful America during the war. Like it's weird. It feels aesthetically like peacetime,
Right.
but it's very clearly not, with the way that the television is saying, stuff like Reds losing territory, more troops drop in the Far East. And then a really cool scene that I loved is when he greets his fellow actor. And I believe that actor's name is Sebastian Leslie, played by Matt Berry. And so he's the only invitee that showed up because everyone's boycotting Cooper Howard because of the ad that he did for vault-tec.
Mm-hmm.
And Sebastian is this like character who seemingly also has no morals. Like, I think Cooper Howard has morals. He's just a confused man, because he is wealthy, right? And his wife is wealthy, and he has this beautiful house. But at the same time, his lifestyle is quickly slipping through his fingers. And so he doesn't resonate with Hollywood, but he also doesn't resonate with these corporate execs who are standing to make a lot of money. So he's caught in between. And Matt Berry's character is also caught in between, but has way less of this like moral compass or this moral battle or this desire to be free. He sells his rights for only $100 and I think it's like $80,000 in a free robot.
Cooper guessed 10 million.
Right. And so, just like it's a really timely discussion for what's going on in our world. And I think that was a cool way that they line it up, where it doesn't feel like it's too note for note, one for one, but it is a cool way to incorporate, how this fictionalized sci-fi world with humor is dealing with these heavy themes, of like humanity versus robots. And I think I prefer the way that this has been handled so far, that theme of like robots and AI and voices and all this stuff. I think that's more interesting in this than it was for me in the Fallout 4 stories. Like, I feel more invested in the way that technology is coming for people's lives in the TV series than I did in the Fallout 4 game. But so they're worried about the Hollywood Reds, and he says, like, Leslie says that the two I wrote this, but the two commiserate over the Hollywood Reds as Leslie claims that radicalism is sweeping through Hollywood like a bad case of the clap, which is a really typical Matt Berry line, especially if you've watched something like What We Do in the Shadows. It's just like a good Matt Berry line. But he says, like, which way it's running, basically saying, like, look at these nerds with the pocket protectors at the pool party. They're going to control the world. And they talk about how Robco bought the rights for Codsworth from the studio, or they bought the studio. So that was a cool scene. I love the aesthetic. And then we're back at the Super Duper Mart in present time with the ghoul, and he's grabbed by a bunch of sheriffs, which I wasn't as compelled by this storyline. This to me was the least interesting part of the episode, meeting the sheriff, because I just didn't really understand like the gravity of it. Like, what is we're dealing with big issues, and then there's kind of these like low level street criminals that kind of remind me of like Fallout 1, which there's a character that you meet in Fallout 1 that looks like the sheriff, and I really like that character from Fallout 1. And so I don't know if this is a nod to him, but it was
I was gonna say it was a lot of this with the sheriff and everything. This whole storyline right here, this side quest, if you will. And I feel like it was a lot of time spent for just a simple payoff for the ghoul, which is, to finally understand or put a face to the name Moldaver, right? Which is cool to learn that the ghoul finally sees her and has that moment. But it was I felt like you were right. Like this was some of this walking to the sheriff and everything. Like, it was a little bit of a wasted screen time where like more interesting conversations were happening in Cooper Howard's day. You know, I would rather see more of Cooper Howard instead of the Ghoul for this one, and then maybe fast forward some of those scenes so that we can make that connection as well. But I was kind of a little bit annoyed. I was like wondering why this was kind of boring me out as well.
Yeah, it's like really the only weak point in the episode, I think, but it does at least serve the purpose of what you said, showing Moldaver, which is, that's not how I remember her, is what he says, and that's the key line for what we were looking for. I think in episode 1, we're like, how do people not remember her? And it's because she had shorter hair. It was like a totally different hairstyle.
Yes.
And so this was kind of a reinforcement of this is why they don't remember her. This is what she looks like. So he was voicing what I think probably Lucy's dad would have been feeling. So then, we're in Vault 4, where we see the doctors and they tell him Maximus he's going to recover. And it's a rotten human tooth that's lodged in his arm, which I thought is a cool detail, very Fallout, very cool. So Lucy's super stoked about being in the vault, but Maximus is really worried. And we got a lot of cool comments about our discussion on Maximus. So remind me, Matt, at the end, we'll read a couple of the comments and do a little bit of audience integration because they had a lot to say about Maximus. It's kind of overwhelming because I refreshed YouTube and I was like, oh shoot, that's a lot of stuff to read before the next episode. But so we'll mention that about Maximus. But
awesome.
He's intelligent, like he's perceptive. He knows like something's off. And this, again, back to our theme of the cult, which is he's like, they're smiling too much. And Lucy's like, no, this is awesome. And then again, right back to his intelligence. He says she smells good. She asks if he wants to have sex. And then he like just totally explains the most bizarre thought process on what sex is. That, again, this is why there's so much discussion about the intelligence of Maximus. And you get a lot of things where people will say, it's because he's the Brotherhood of Steel. He's in the army for a while. It's like, I guarantee you guys in the army know what sex is, So to me, it's a fun thing. Like I like it. I think it's funny. And I like the confusion that it puts us in as the audience. Right. But I don't think that any of us know for sure what's going on with Maximus. Like, I think that's going to take season 2 to really figure out like what is going on.
He's a bit of a wild card. He really is.
You
don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. It reminds me of a little bit like Charlie from It's Always Sunny. Just this wild card guy.
There's a lot of like deep lore below the surface that we clearly don't know about when it comes to Maximus. But it seems everyone agrees he has low charisma. Like he has no charisma, which translates into a lot of humor for the audience. So Overseer Benjamin. Now this is a fun tie-in, but this episode reminded me of Archer. Like this felt like an episode of Archer because, Archer is very, again, that 60s kind of neo-noir style, really cool presentation, slick, but then combine that with these hilarious, dark kind of what the fuck moments, where it's like, what's going on? And there's, I want to say his name is Krieger, the scientist from Archer. But they literally have a actor from Archer, and I believe the actor's name. Let me pull him up on Chris Parnell. Yeah, so Chris Parnell plays Cyril in Archer, and so I thought they really nail the vibe sometimes where with their casting. They also casted from Portlandia. Why am I blanking on his name? From SNL.
Fred
Armisen. So their use of, some of my favorite comedians with Matt Berry, Fred Armisen, Chris Parnell, like there's so many cool Easter eggs for these other shows. Like I would love to see, did you ever watch Last Man on Earth?
Yes.
I think he would make Will Forte would make amazing cameo in Fallout.
Yes,
so
Chris
Parnell. Yeah,
I
Chris
almost
Parnell
thought it was him. Sorry to cut you off. I almost thought it was Will Forte in that first scene where he drank all of Lucy's water. I thought that was Will Forte, but he could have played that role so well too. Not to give the actor credit, whoever played the lone waster. Hilarious. You are funny. You are awesome, but you totally had a Will Forte vibe.
Totally. So Chris Parnell's character is funny in this, and basically creates this cult. Like everyone, it's they're on the outside, we're on the inside. Like surface dwellers are crazy and weird, and not even acknowledging his single eyeball. And again, the humor of there's all these mutations in these people in the vault, and yet all he's thinking that they should be aware about is like, oh, this is how you flush the toilet, and keep in mind there's only one foosball table. And I think that kind of juxtaposition shows that Chris Parnell is not really in on the joke like he claims to be. When he even does that joke that a huge bomb or whatever, he bombs the joke about the bomb or whatever.
So dumb.
So what do you think of the introduction of Vault 4 and Overseer Benjamin?
I love this. I think it was the perfect light side quest that I needed for the show to incorporate the quirky comedy of the Fallout universe. It was perfect. Also, like, just to have a whole nother vault with a whole new mystery is interesting. And the fact that they showed it already makes you pique your interest of what other vaults or stories are we going to hear in season 2? We know that the Vault 33, 31, 32, now Vault 4 are not the only ones. And we've known this because we played the games, but I think it's exciting to kind of show that to the audience where like Caitlin or Mo, they didn't play the games, right? And so now it's sparking their interest in this whole endless possibilities of murder, mystery, archaeology, it's really fun. I really liked the setup, and I like how it ends up turning out as well as the plot points in the vault. It's very interesting because it had me flip-flopping as well. So I thought it was really good. It kind of reflects like an in-game moment.
Yeah, and Chris Parnell is a perfect casting because if you watch Archer, Cyril is like the most soulless. Like he's like do you remember those those like oatmeal wafers that I forget what they were called. They're like crispy and airy.
Rice cakes.
Something like they had no flavor, but yet they were so bad for you. Like there's probably so much sugar in them, but yet it still tasted flavorless, and you're still hungry after. Like that's Cyril. It's like you think he's saying something of substance, but all he's saying is like that he only cares about himself. And I feel like Overseer Benjamin reflects that too, where it's like he's so vapid. There's like nothing going on below the surface.
Like the whole goosey stuff.
He's just a weird dude that you can't trust. And he seems harmless, but he also seems like he's so out there that maybe he would okay a bunch of crazy stuff.
Well, he's so weird with Floor 12, I think it's called.
Right.
He's so weird about that, and he does it really well because I'm sitting there with Lucy going, this guy's weird. This vault is bad in some sort of weird way. Maximus was right. It is a cult, and there's more things that we'll talk about that happen in the vault that scream cult to me. So I thought it was well done. It was funny and it was interesting.
Right. So then we cut back to the Cooper residence with Barb and Cooper. So, Cooper is already kind of wishing that Barb didn't work there, asking her if she ever thought of working somewhere else. And Barb says, like, after doing these ads, it's practically a family business, trying to, kind of enmesh their relationship with this company. And then Cooper dreams aloud about quitting show business, buying a ranch in Bakersfield, which, again, if you're from California, it's really cool the way that they use the geography. And I think this is why people like Fallout. And this is why people are so defensive of the lore, because the map is always really interesting. And just hearing real world locations that we know, whether you're from the East Coast or the West Coast, like having your locations accurately represented, figuring out where the Sierra Madre is from Fallout New Vegas, or trying to figure out where Shady Sands is and what's happening in Bakersfield. Like all these things are interesting. So anytime they do mention a city, it's cool because it's like, oh yeah, Bakersfield. Oh, okay, that's interesting.
And that must be me of Cyberpunk as well, and that universe and the whole D&D, fantasy with that guys play the board games and they get really into the Cyberpunk lore. Because that's also in our world too, right? It has that kind of similar vibe and interest with the fan base for sure.
Yeah, so his dream is to go up to Bakersfield, which is farming community, and he wants to raise chickens, be a real cowboy. Again, this is that like veteran kind of midlife crisis, looking for purpose in the world post-war, but also the war is still very much going. That's another thing with the timeline I would love to know more about, is like Cooper's timeline of when he served, how old was he, and then how does that all relate to how he's processing it now? But yeah, he wants to raise chickens, and then he sees Barb's Pip-Boy, and she says that they licensed it from Robco, and then Barb tells Cooper that the company is filled with guys like Bud Askins and vault-tec will exist with or without her, basically rationalizing to him like, hey, we're not going to stop this from happening. We hear about peace talks, I want to say from the news, and an energy crisis and all of this stuff kind of happening in the background. And then we have this cool scene in a bar, which reminds me again of what you said, the Quentin Tarantino Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It has that look. But there is Charles Whiteknife, and he's pitching to Cooper this idea that vault-tec has a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that peace talks don't go through, because he says that the U.S. government has outsourced the survival of the human race to vault-tec. And then he uses the illustration of a film that they worked on where one of the cattle ranchers who owns half of Missouri is more powerful than the sheriff. And so he's saying that vault-tec is $1 trillion company that owns half of everything. The cattle ranchers are in charge unless the people do something about it. And that's the theme of this episode, is vault-tec is now responsible for the future of America. And by being in charge of America, they're going to shape the world. And so there's only so much time for Charles Whiteknife to get Cooper and others to go to these meetings to try and stop vault-tec before it's too late. What were your thoughts on the scene?
I thought it was good. I think all these flashbacks are really interesting because we're finally seeing the moments that led up to the D-Day, right? And what set up that very first scene that we got from the whole series of that birthday party, and he's alone with his daughter, and something happened between him and his wife. So now we're seeing those moments finally, and it's honestly super interesting, but also sad to see Barbara already sort of like given up on this world. And throughout the episode, you can tell she's mourning for the world. They're outside hanging out in the jacuzzi. It's almost like this one last moment of enjoying. But remember the vault-tec, and poor daughter's gonna have all these problems. And I thought it was just so weird. Like if my wife was talking to me that way, I'd be like, do you already know something that I don't? Like you're acting so weird and shady and depressing. And I'm trying to like fight this and get out of this and just focus on us and our freedoms, right? So I thought this scene of him like trying to like kind of like lift the veil a little bit. It's like just getting the hint, like here's the car to come, the invitation, if you will, right? And because of those conversations with his wife, I can see why he would, be interested in that. I think they're leading the breadcrumbs really well and making it very believable for Coop. I'm very interested to see again. We didn't really get to see it in this season, but I want to see the more of those moments that lead up to the divorce, the separation, and I want to see more D-Day. So. Yeah, I'm loving all this, Spencer. I'm loving all these flashbacks, and it's super interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
I think their relationship is represented really well on camera between the two actors, and their scenes continue as, they have that conversation that we mentioned, the conversation about the dog. Why can't we bring the dog? He says, like, are the blue jumpsuits also mandatory? And they both make great points, which is like, why do I have to wear a blue jumpsuit? But then her point is, if it's a nuclear event, why do you care about the color of the blue jumpsuit? And no, a 2-hour drive isn't going to cut it. And again, the geography of California comes into play because, he's not going to make it from Bakersfield if their vault is in LA. And she's painting the picture for what we'll see play out, which is she's been offered the opportunity to be a part of the management vault, to be in charge of managing the future of America through those who survive inside of the vaults. And he finds that suspect. Like, what does that mean? Wait, we can't just buy a vault? Well, we can't buy a good vault. And she's like, that concerns him. Which really,
that's
I think,
so scary to hear that too, and have that information. And man, I cannot imagine being in his shoes. I would also go search out what's going on,
Yeah. So then in Vault 4, we're back with Benjamin, and Maximus is looking at the reactors. Birdie catches him. She assigns him to a room, and then, and this is the wiki summary, by the way, but Maximus is wowed by the Vault's amenities and indulges in their luxuries. Lucy enters the Vault 4 schoolroom. This is interesting. Okay, so this is, again, one of those things that, kind of made the internet react in a very strong way, because I think there's dates about the NCR peaking in power in 2041, and then finally the fall of Shady Sands, and there's a flag. And I was wondering, is that just there for teaching the history, or is this vault somehow controlled by the new California Republic? That was something I was like, I need to look more into that, because there's a flag and it's kind of held there in reverence. But wouldn't vault-tec be not proud of the California Republic?
Remember how a lot of their residents are refugees, and not everyone goes out to, and we haven't gone to that scene yet, but there's that scene where Lucy's invited to have this culty worship night, basically worship ceremony, some sort of ceremony, and most of the culty people who are always smiling go, and it's assumed that all these people are from the surface, and now they live down there. And who are they having reverence to, honoring, and asking for guidance, for salvation, if you will, to bring in the new future, the new world, is Moldaver. And that's her enemy, right? That's who destroyed her vault. So I thought that was pretty. No,
I think you nailed that. I think, you're right. They're refugees, and so vault-tec is trying to control history, probably by teaching them, not being too controlling, but still ultimately controlling, I think, is probably what's happening by letting them express themselves. So back in the present, the ghoul is in, this weird kind of shack with the government. And my big takeaway was that there's a wanted super mutant sign. I don't know if you noticed this, but there's a sign of a wanted super mutant. And I was like, I hope we get to see that in season 2. That is
cool. Yeah.
Because we haven't seen a super mutant yet. And I agree with Tim Kaine, where he says basically it's cool that they didn't just go for all of the creatures, Deathclaw and super mutants. You save stuff, you show that you have confidence in the IP, but you tease stuff, which is cool.
Right.
There's also a super mutant arm in, I think it's the second episode, at the laboratories by the Enclave. So I hope that we learn who this wanted super mutant is. But so nothing too crazy. Let me just skim. The ghoul gets out. We never thought he was going to be stuck with these guys. So then we're at Hollywood Forever, and this is where Cooper goes to the meeting and he meets Moldaver, and she is known as Miss Williams according to the wiki. And then she introduced herself as a big fan. And then it intercut with the present where she's now the Flame Mother being worshipped by the Vault 4 residents. Right. And then Lucy is freaking out. She takes the elevator to the Forbidden Level 12. Right. And then she sees, this is the wiki summary, jars of organic material and a video of a woman giving birth to a spawn of gulpers. That is so gross and so horrific.
So
and I love it, but it's
me too.
Disgusting.
I love it still.
But yeah, it's that
disgusting.
That will give me nightmares.
So are those all those women in the cryo chambers or vaults? Are they all pregnant with gulpers or abominations as well? Is that what's assumed with that?
Yeah, I don't know.
It was so dark, dude. So
yeah, I'll try to
disgusting.
If they show that. I think they do show more, and they tell us more in the next episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about it then.
But yeah, she obviously freaks out. She gets into a fight, and then I think it ends with Maximus enjoying a bowl of popcorn while he's watching a video of a waterfall. So yeah, that's the episode. I thought great episode. What were your thoughts? Like overall, did you enjoy this episode?
Well, I will say this is the episode where I feel like I started liking Maximus. Maybe I just started getting his humor, like that's part of him, that side of him, that side of his naivety, right? It's kind of weird. Like what I was worried about Lucy, Maximus was doing, and I had to this whole time figure out if I liked it, but I think it really paid off. I think the jokes they gave him this episode were funny, and they were lighthearted, and they made him a lot more likable. And then also it kind of added that furthering a little bit more of those like romance arcs that you have in RPGs, right? And a little bit of that charisma moment where he's talking about sex with Lucy. And he passed the skill check, but he just still declined. He still said, "No, I don't want to."
Yeah, let's go into the comments about we put out a short saying
about
what's
Maximus.
the deal. Yeah, what's the deal with Maximus? And my premise was from the last episode was that he's kind of echoing a template that game designers will put in games like Fallout, which is like you have a dumb character playthrough where all your responses can kind of be dumb and silly. And so, my takeaway though was that the actor is so layered and has so much nuance and so much happening, in the eyes, like acting is in the eyes, and he has that sophistication and so I was like, I don't know if that totally works. Like I feel like his intelligence is gonna have to expand by the next season because he's gone through so much. So I'll read through several of the comments. So we have Crab Apples. He said, he's not dumb at all. Maximus is a fish out of water, similar to Lucy. But unlike Lucy, he's never had to think. His meals, his workouts, when he poops, when he showers, we're all told to him when and how. Now he's got to figure it out. He has to adapt in a world he's unfamiliar with. And then we got, he has the Idiot Savant perk, which is you'll randomly receive XP from completing any action. The lower your intelligence, the higher the chance. And then let's see here.
Yeah, it's for like the luck, right? You put in perks and luck. Mm-hmm.
Then someone said, I actually really, really liked Maximus as a character, so much so that I was really surprised to see some of the negative reactions that people had to him. To me, he's a quintessential child soldier. He behaves like a beaten dog. He shows aggression and even some cruelty when he is in a position of power or power armor. He tucks his tail and cowers when the tables turn against him, and when Lucy breaks through his outer shell, he is finally honest and super loud. Finally honest, and we see that he is burdened. With fear and shame. Even his voice changes depending on the situation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he almost speaks like a scared child. With other times, he puts on this sort of scary tone. Mm-hmm. Moving forward, I could either see him becoming a force of good or even becoming Lucy's ultimate nemesis. And I'm excited about either one of those possibilities, especially considering they have feelings for each other. Can't wait to see more Maximus. Someone said, I was thinking low charisma with middle intelligence because he fails his speech checks every time. Someone else said, I wouldn't say, this is channel 23, I wouldn't say dumb, but rather socially inexperienced compared to other things that he might excel at, including solving problems, etc. And then, let's see.
Wow, there's so many comments about Maximus.
Yeah. So that's the gist. I think we all kind of have our own thoughts and theories, but something to do with charisma, something to do with skill checks, something to do with
I think all those comments were fair, and I think we've echoed what they said. And sure, there's moments where we've laughed a little bit too much, we're a little harsh. Sure, we're having fun. But there is truth to everything that they said, and I think we had some good takes on it as well. But that was really fun to hear what you guys thought and read them. I'm excited to see future comments. And is the jury still out for Maximus?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we're gonna have Maximus is kind of he generates a lot of conversation, so I think we'll be having lots of discussions about Maximus. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'm sure we'll be talking things Fallout in the comments and in the shorts. And if you've watched some of this long form content, then we appreciate that. Leave a comment, share it with a friend, subscribe. Yeah, you can subscribe to me here at the Yetti Den, and subscribe to Matt at JumbyJumbwa, JumbyJumbwa.
You got it. Oh, you got it.
So thank you guys again, and we will see you guys next time when we break down the next episode of Fallout. And later.
Peace.